everyone. I'm Mike Cannici, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. One of the things we're going to do every now and then is spotlight a former athlete in the Valley. And today I am honored to have with us number 88 for the Derby Red Raiders. He was a student there from 1988 to 1992, also captain of the basketball team, Joe Ferrigno. And Joe, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me.
Now, Joe, let me ask you, did you grow up in Derby pretty much your whole life?
I did. I'm actually from Monroe. In second grade, I moved to Derby.
Right. And when did a love for sports start with you? Never mind just football, but sports in general.
I started playing football in Monroe when I was in first grade. My next door neighbor was the president of the Monroe Youth Athletic Association, and he saw me playing with the kids all the time and saw me loving playing football. So I wasn't of age yet, but I probably want to incriminate him. They used to sneak lead weights into my thigh pad so I'd make the weight. So, because I was really small then. So I started in first grade, and I played 2 years in Monroe.
Right.
And then I moved to Derby in second grade, and just automatic. I loved it. I loved it since then.
Right. Now, I know Derby eventually started a Mighty Mites program. Were you part of that Mighty Mites program?
No, that wasn't around then when I was
right.
started.
So you basically had to wait till you got to Pee Wee's.
Correct.
Pretty much, right? Now, when you moved to Derby, were you able to play right away, or did
right?
You
No, right away I played.
Yeah. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. Did you have Ernie Cirillo as
Ernie,
your coach?
Yes.
Right, and I think, was Dave Stockmo there? I mean, there were a couple guys.
No,
right.
he might have been. I don't remember Dave, but absolutely Ernie.
Right, and I remember at the time, you guys didn't win a lot of games, and one of the things you guys were able to do, though, was beat Ansonia. I mean, that was one of your couple wins of that season. So, I mean, that was always a big thing. If maybe if you didn't have the best of year, if you beat Ansonia,
it's all mattered.
Right. You can.
My Pop Warner career did not go very well in Derby. I think I played Pop Warner about 5 or 6 years.
Right.
In Derby, and I think we might have won 2 to 4 games, possibly at the most.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a rough few years there.
Right. Now, did you start out as a tight end right away, or
no? I was a big boy then, so I was on the line.
Right.
I fought it with every coach I had. I wanted to be a running back. I would love to run the ball. I wanted to score the touchdown, but no one would give me that chance, Mike. So I was on the line most of my Pop Warner career, and I didn't really move to tight end, or I was actually fullback until my freshman year.
Right. Now, let me ask you. You said you were on the line. Were you a guard, tackle? Which one did you?
I played every position.
Right.
Center, guard, and tackle.
You know what a lot of people don't realize, I think a big reason, too, why you didn't want to be on the line, not just so much because, being a receiver or running back, that's the glory positions, but when you're on the line, there's so much responsibilities you have. I mean, if you're a guard, you have to pull. If you're a tackle, you have to go downfield a lot. I mean, center, you're basically getting hit on every play. So, I mean, the line isn't always fun.
No, the line is definitely not fun, and I could tell you because Pop Warner years, Johnny and Roman and Jason Palmieri were my best friends. So the three of us kind of grew up together, and those guys were the running backs. So they were scoring the touchdowns, and it really aggravated that I couldn't get in there with them.
Right. Now, did you play any defense?
Oh yeah. I was always a linebacker on defense.
Right, linebacker.
Always.
Right. Now, we'll get into your high school career, but did you have a preference? Did you like defense more or offense more?
Mike, I just love football. I just loved being out there. I didn't prefer either one. As long as I was out there playing is all that mattered to me.
Right. Now, you had said you lived in Monroe. Let me ask you, did your father grow up in the Valley? Or?
So my father and my grandparents are from the Valley. My grandfather's from Ansonia.
Oh, wow.
He's actually in the Hall of Fame in Ansonia.
Oh, okay.
And my father grew up in Derby.
Right. So your father had an idea about what the Derby football program was about. So you kind of, a lot of times I think kids who don't come from Derby, you said you started in Monroe. Mm-hmm. They don't really tend to understand the whole tradition.
Absolutely.
But having your father, you knew right away pretty much.
Right?
I
did. And actually, my grandfather is the one, not that my father didn't, but my grandfather just kind of instilled it in me also, just pushing me to do that and do better.
Right. Now, let me ask you, was it tough for your grandfather at first to root for Derby?
You know what? He was a Joe Ferrigno fan, so he didn't care.
Right.
It didn't bother him.
Because, back then, I mean, now if you look at it today, the rivalry isn't quite the same. There's not the same hatred. But back then, when you were a kid, I mean, that rivalry was intense, and it was hard. I mean, I'll give you a good example. You had a kid by the name of Jim Gregorio on your
Yep.
team in high school. His father grew up in Ansonia, and I
Mhm.
know it was really hard for his father to root for Derby. So, back then it was a
I'm
very
sure. I'm
intense
sure.
time.
I just think because of the transition from when I was in second grade and the time I got to high school, my grandfather was a huge part of the sports with me. So I think it would made it easier for him as he got older.
Right. And it had to be a great time as a kid to go to Friday night games when Derby was playing. Then Saturday, sometimes Derby played on Saturdays, and then you guys are playing Sundays. So, I mean, it was just like a great 3 days for you. It was a great time to be a kid.
Absolutely, and you got to remember back then, you had your Jeff Rices, your Bobby Orcianos, your Mark Orcianos. They were destroying teams. Jimmy Lewis, they were
Right.
they were
Yeah.
killing teams. 30, 40 points they were putting up on those teams, and it was awesome. I just loved being a part of it.
Right. Now, as you said, you hated the fact that you would see Jason and John score all these touchdowns and you couldn't be on that side of the ball. But did you enjoy playing football even though you weren't playing the position?
Oh yeah, I'm just fooling around.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had fun. I mean, we used to. I remember going with Jason, John, and I. We would go to Bridgeport, and they would come out with like 50 or 60 kids,
Right.
and there would be like maybe 14 or 15 of us, and they would score 40 or 50 points on us every time. And
Right.
we were lucky to get a first down, but we had fun. We had a lot of fun.
Right. Now, let me ask you, when did you start developing a love for basketball? Because, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but, you were a very good basketball player, too. And I know, Derby doesn't always win a lot in basketball, but you were very underrated as a basketball player. When did that love start for Joe Ferrigno?
My grandfather, it was the Hall of Fame for me in Ansonia. And
Right.
when I grew up, every day I wasn't playing football, I had to play basketball.
Right.
So as soon as I got off the bus, he'd be waiting for me, and we go in the driveway and we shoot baskets for hours. At nighttime was when the Boston Celtics were winning their championships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They were on TV almost every night. He'd play every other night. I'd have to sit downstairs and watch basketball with him. And he would, I had to do the moves that Larry Bird did. So he made me emulate
Right.
them. So my love for the game grew. I actually never talked about this with anybody.
Really?
Yeah. No one's ever asked me about my basketball career. But I love basketball. It's one of my passions. I
Right.
don't, not as much as football, but I really enjoy basketball, and my whole family bleeds green.
Right. And now, did you play biddy and stuff when
Oh,
you were
yeah.
a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those were some great times, too. You guys had some good all-star teams.
We did.
I know Rich Lord was a
Yes.
very good player,
Yep.
Benny Bartone. I mean,
Mhm.
you guys had some good teams back then. I mean, I remember watching those teams play at Irvin School. I mean, it was a good time to watch, because when you're a kid who's a few years younger and you see these guys,
Sure.
you do develop, you start to idolize them a little bit, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
Our 7th, 8th grade team that you're talking about, we could compete with anybody.
Right.
No one was having those big growth spurts yet, so everybody was pretty much the same size.
Right.
So we could score. We played defense. I totally remember that. It's not till we got to high school where people started really growing and we
Right.
couldn't keep up.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. When would you say you were starting to get comfortable in your football career? Like, would you say maybe like 6th grade, you started to really feel like, you could be a player?
Well, what happened was my father went out and bought me a weight set.
Oh, okay.
And it was probably like 5th or 6th grade, and I didn't know how to work out. So all I did 7 days a week is I lifted weights in my parents' downstairs.
Right.
The same body part every single day. I did 10 sets of 10 of 100 and something pounds. So I started, getting on some muscle mass, and it was noticeable, and I was really starting to develop in football. And
Right.
it was about that time that I'm like, I got something going here.
Right.
And then I had a growth spurt in 8th grade. So I went up to 210 pounds in 8th grade.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yeah, so I was the biggest kid in the 7th and 8th grade. And what happened was the football coaches were talking. I couldn't play Pop Warner because
Right.
the cutoff, I think, was 135 pounds back
Yeah,
then.
it was. Back then
And I was
one
210. So
Right.
no one realized that I really wasn't going to grow after that. We thought I was going to keep going because my grandfather was 6'5".
Right.
So so the coaches wanted me to play varsity. So they talked about me coming to the varsity team, but the Board of Ed wouldn't let them. So they decided on let me play freshman football when I was in 8th grade.
Right.
The problem with that is they would only let me practice. They wouldn't let me play in the games.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I
Because that changed over time.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So I'm like, I was saying to my parents, I'm not doing it. I'm going to go out there and bust my butt, practice every day, and I can't play any games. I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Right.
So Mr. DeSenza come up to me. He's like, Joey, you can't play. I'm sorry. But you could practice, and I want you to practice. I said, okay, Coach, I'll practice.
Right.
So, it was just
kind of hard to say no to him.
I couldn't say no to Coach DeSenza.
Right. So as time went on, too, and you're starting to get, a lot more comfortable, did you feel that, again, you said you weren't a tight end till what, like 8th grade, but you were a fullback more or
Correct.
less. Did tight end happen by accident? I mean, did you think you were going to be a fullback, the rest of your career? I mean,
I can't tell you how tight end happened. I can
Right.
tell you that I was a fullback. I wanted to be a fullback. I wanted to be a linebacker because I like to hit.
right.
And I think it was around because even as a sophomore, I was a fullback. My junior year, they said, junior year,
Right.
they said, you want to play tight end? We need a backup tight end. And I just wanted to play.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do it.
Right.
That's how it started.
Now, like I said before, some of those players you end up idolizing. You watch them play.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any particular player or players that you kind of idolized as a kid, and watching them play made you want to get on that field and play yourself?
I have. You'll laugh at this. It wasn't a local person.
Oh, okay.
All right. I wanted to be Brian Bosworth.
Oh, wow. He
So,
was popular back then.
I wanted to
Yeah.
be Brian Bosworth. I bought his book. I was like 8th or 9th grade. I read the book.
Right.
It got me in so much trouble. I wanted to have his attitude. I wanted to play like him.
Right.
And all I wanted to do was go out there and hit. And
Right.
it turned out to be a little bit of a disaster now. That damn book, I wish I never read it.
Right.
But that's what I wanted to be.
Right. He was popular at the time.
Right.
He, just got out of college, and, I think he was with the Seahawks.
The Seahawks, yep.
Right. And he was really popular. He had a real good first year, but I think what happened with him is the fame got to him. He started
Right.
doing movies and stuff, and I don't think his heart was in football anymore because he kind of really, was never the same player.
No, actually, that was part of it, Mike. And I know that he was undersized playing middle linebacker. He was like
Right.
230 pounds going against those 300-pound linemen.
Yeah, yeah.
His shoulders ended up just deteriorating. He couldn't hit anymore.
Right. So now let's fast forward a little bit. You're a freshman in high school, and I believe, was it Tom D'Onofrio or John Oko that you had as your head coach for the freshman team? I think it might have been Tommy's first year, right?
No, They were both. You know what? I think Tommy was the head coach, and Oko was the JV coach.
Okay.
I think
so.
I
You
think-
did have Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy
your
was
first year.
yes, yep.
So talk about that freshman team a little bit, because that freshman team had a decent year, if I'm
We
not
did.
mistaken.
I think
right?
we went 7-3 or 8-2, something like that.
Right.
In that area. I may be off a game or two. We had a good team. We had a good team.
Right.
Do you know the record?
I think it was at least 8-2. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I know it was a good team, and it was a good class. I mean, you had yourself, Ben Bartone,
Mm-hmm.
Don Shepard played that year. You had Rich Lord.
Yep, John Paquet.
Right, John Paquet. I mean, you had some, I think Jimmy Gregorio.
Yep,
I
correct,
mean,
yes.
You had some good players.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looked like big things were going to, and a lot of these players were big on that state championship team.
Yes, absolutely.
But what was it like freshman year for you? I mean, you're starting to learn this system. I think it was the wing tee at the time. I mean, talk about your freshman year a little bit, just in general.
Because it wasn't a big year for me personally, because I played in my 8th grade for my freshman. So I played freshman year for 2 years basically.
Right.
So there wasn't a huge adjustment for me. I kind of had it down pat at that time.
Right.
We had a good solid team. I remember that.
Right.
Tough to go back there, I don't
I
remember
mean, it's hard to remember and stuff, but I mean, I remember as a kid, freshman year it's more of the relaxing year, because you're with your friends still. You're not playing against the older kids, where you're just kind of that's like your last year of really like being all together and playing. I mean, those times are a lot of fun. I mean, did you have fun with that freshman team?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we won games. We were putting a pounding on people.
Right.
I was fullback. Who was our running back then? I don't remember. Was it?
I would say Paquet was definitely in the backfield.
Okay.
Right.
And then I remember
Even Gary Lucarelli, I think, probably got some reps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that time you were allowed to bring down the JVs. So the
Right.
JVs that didn't play in the games, they would bring 3 or 4 down
To play freshman.
play freshmen. And I do remember that when we went to Amity, that Buddy Turnovich would not let the kids play.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
that was the only coach in our league that would not allow the 10th graders to play with them, and that was it was a tough night then. I do remember that.
Right. That's crazy. Wow. I'll have to get on him about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. He would not let our JV play. That was our first loss, I believe.
Right. So now let's talk about, again, you're not going to remember much, but your freshman basketball team. I think you guys won a lot of games that year too, because as you said, kids had not grown fully yet, so you guys were competitive a lot. And I think you had Coach Monahan as a freshman, right? And I believe Ben didn't play freshman year.
He did
I
not.
think he wrestled.
He took it off.
Just imagine if you had Ben, you guys
Right.
probably even have a better record. But it was a good freshman team. And I remember Coach Monahan saying, with this class, I'm going to win a lot of games. I mean, did you have a good feeling about basketball at that time?
I just loved the game of basketball, and Ben did take that year off, and I didn't remember he wrestled, but I remember him not playing.
Right.
Coach Mo was tough.
Yeah, he made
tough.
you run a lot.
Oh man,
and
he
the
was
bricks,
tough.
but
He
the
was
bricks,
tough.
yeah. Right. But I mean, one of the good things is you have to kind of be that way because a lot of these kids, they have that football mentality.
Right.
So when you go over to basketball, it's hard to motivate them to win because they've spent a whole season trying to win in another sport.
Sure.
And basketball doesn't always get the recognition because they don't win a lot. So I think a lot of Derby kids are conditioned to lose. I mean, you are a type of kid that likes to win. I mean, did you want to win from the start?
Mike, I'm very competitive.
Right.
And I love to win. And the games that I lost, I kind of black out. I don't remember losing them.
Right.
So I think fast forward a little bit to my senior year, I think I won one basketball in my high school career.
Right.
But that I don't like to lose. So.
Right. Exactly. So now you're a sophomore and you're getting ready. What was the first day of spring practice like? I mean, were you a little nervous? You don't seem like the type of kid that's nervous, but you are a kid at the time. I mean, did you have those goosebumps?
I remember playing the spring game, my
freshman into sophomore year.
Correct.
Right.
And I remember I was playing maybe linebacker. No, I was on offense.
Right.
And I blindsided Mike Valentine and I depleted him.
He was a big kid,
He
too.
was a big kid.
Right.
And I was like, I was a trash talker. And
right.
and I said something to him, and I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
He got up and he wanted to kill me.
Right. He was a captain.
Yeah, he was a
too.
captain.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, what did I do that for? But it was that Bosworth mentality. I kind of lost a little, but then that got me in a lot of trouble, like I said.
Right. That was one of the big reasons, though, Derby was so successful because they may not ability-wise been able to match up with certain people, but they were as tough as any kids out
absolutely.
there. Like they wanted to hit. They weren't afraid. It didn't matter who they went out there with. And you go into that sophomore season, I think there were a lot of things predicted for that team. They kind of finished, I think, 6-4. Had a devastating loss to Shelton at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you evaluate your sophomore year? Would you say that you felt good about, getting some playing time into your junior year?
No, absolutely. I mean, that was a tough year.
Right.
That I remember that was a tough year. Derby wasn't used to losing like that, so 6-4 was not acceptable.
Right.
So I think we come up my junior year, again, Johnny, Jason, and I we kind of formed like this bond together. We kind of went up every year together, except my 8th grade to their freshman. But I still practiced.
But you
with them.
practiced,
right?
With
I still
them,
practiced.
right.
With them. So I knew we had something going, and they were training hard. They were training all summer. I remember them training very hard.
That backfield of Johnny and Jason.
Right.
I don't know if you could ever find. There's been great runners for Derby, but usually there's never two great ones.
Correct. At the same time.
I mean, if they were keying on Jason, John was going to, make it happen. Same thing if they were keying on John. And both of those guys were just so dangerous. I mean, that's a tough thing for a coach to try to prepare for two kids like that.
They were fast. They were powerful.
Right.
They could run.
And John was a great receiver,
John
People don't even
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, he was so dangerous as a receiving back as well. I mean, and then, Jason was just,
we had a lot of weapons on that team.
Right.
We really did.
So, before we talk about that team, you're a sophomore on the basketball team. I think Tony Lionetti took over the team.
Yes.
And, one of the things that he was doing, I know it wasn't, resulting in victories, but you guys were competitive.
Right.
You guys were battling North Haven. You were battling Chester. I think you even knocked off North Haven your junior year, which was a big win. They were starting to be competitive. What do you think is the problem with basketball? Do you just think it's the size? I mean, because you guys are always good for 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter it just dies at the end.
It just catches up with you. I think it's the size. I mean, I was a center. I was the tallest kid on that team. I was
Right.
5'10" on my tippy toes. So at some point, the athletics is going to take over.
Right.
It's just it happens. I mean.
You know what was good about you, though, Joe? I always remember this when you were playing basketball. The fans loved to rattle you because you were the biggest kid. And you never let it bother you. You would always smile when they did it. Like, it didn't seem to annoy you. If it did, you weren't going to let them show it. I always remember they would just be saying this to you, that to you, and you would just always smile. Like, I mean, how were you able to, like, as a kid, not let that bother you?
I just have thick skin. I just,
Right.
I because I'm a trash talker,
Right.
I was used to, hearing stuff back. And when the fans got into it, I knew I was doing something right to upset them. So
Right.
that's why I was smiling.
So now let's talk about the 90 team because, everybody that's ever grown up in Derby loves that team.
Right.
And I don't think there was big things predicted for that team, as far as the writers went. There was one writer that predicted you guys would go 6-4, maybe 7-3 at best. But, I look to that Seymour game, the second game of the year. The first game, you beat Brantford after they had beat you the year before. You beat them 21-0.
Mm-hmm.
But that second game of the year against Seymour was a very good team that year. And you guys go out to a 26-0 lead at the half. I mean, did you have a great feeling that this was going to be a magical team after that game?
I think what I'm remembering is I thought that beforehand.
Right.
I really saw everybody all summer they were training really hard, and I didn't train with them. I used to train by myself a lot of the times.
Right.
So, but I always remember going to the track late at night, and everybody would be leaving the field, and they were training really hard. I'm like, what, this is going to be. I mean, I didn't obviously know what was going to happen, but I knew we were going to have a good season. I didn't know how good it was going to
Right.
be.
Before we get into it, talk about those coaches a little bit. Coach DeCenzo, Coach Alu, Coach Oko, Coach Steve Francisco. I mean, all characters in their own way. Mr. Alu's a funny guy because he could be screaming at you one minute, then the next minute he's giving you a big hug.
Right.
And then
it's hard to process that,
Right. And then John D., there were times I said to myself, D is there to fire these guys up because D could just make you laugh, Sometimes you didn't know what he was always saying, but I mean, those guys they were so unique, but they were very good coaches. Talk a little bit about that staff.
Mr. DeCenzo, the best. Love
Right.
that guy. I think I talked to him once in the past 20 years. If he called me today to ask me to run through a wall for him, I'd do it.
Right.
And I'm sure there's many of us that feel that way about him. He could just touch you, I can't tell you why. He just has that effect on the guys.
And he's a big-time motivator.
Absolutely.
Because his speeches in the locker room, thing about him is he could get on you when you're not doing what you're supposed to, but then, the next minute he could be patting you on the back, and whether win or lose, he's patting you on the back saying, great job. I mean, he loved his players. He really did.
He cared.
Right.
He definitely cared.
So
Mr. D, you don't get much better than him.
Right.
Again, total different coach, but just, every football team needs a Mr. D.
Right. And I mean, in the classroom, he's just as funny too.
Absolutely.
I mean, the things he says, you could write a book about it.
Great guy.
Right.
Great guy.
So now I think it's the North Haven game, and what a game that was.
Mm-hmm.
A 13-10 overtime victory. Scott Ezzo made a great catch in the end zone. But Sean Wandell goes down with an injury that night, breaks his wrist. I don't think he returned till the Shelton game. You get put in at tight end to replace him. Talk about that, because I know you were trying to get on the field, and he was putting you on the field a little bit. Right. But now you're the main tight end. I mean, first game, you got to play against a tough Cheshire team. I got to believe you weren't worried. You were pumped up, right, to get out there?
Mike, again, I loved football, and I just wanted to play. So I never thought about, oh my God, I'm starting now. I just always had that starter mentality.
Right.
It was just never a thought of like, oh crap, man, what do I do now? I'm out here. But it was just normal, my normal.
Right. Now let me ask you this, because I hear different stories, and I know we're going back 26 years. But talk to me about the East Haven game, because you guys kind of, Coach DeCenzo even admits he took it too easy on you guys that week, looking ahead to Ansonia. And you guys win 21-7, but you were only up, I think, 7-6 or 14-7 at the half. Everybody I talked to says he made you guys not talk on the way home. He treated it like a loss. Talk about that East Haven game a little bit, how crazy that was.
Well, I will tell you this. Rumor has it that there was a party the night before.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure how true it was because I wasn't there.
Right.
That being said, on the way home, there was no talking.
Right.
He was not happy with us. We did not play well.
Right.
And
Do you think you just were looking ahead too much to Ansonia?
I honestly, of course, he's going to take the blame for it, but I do not think he had anything to. There was no light practices.
Right.
In my opinion.
Exactly. But it's things like that too, Joe, that about this team, and Rob Hyder said it, you guys would bend, but you never would break. As sloppy as you played that night, you still won by 2 touchdowns.
Correct.
Had you played your A game, I'm sure you win by, a lot more. But now you go into this Ansonia game, and it just seemed like everybody was getting hurt too on this team. And that's the type of thing with championship teams. It's not easy. You go through a lot of adversity. Talk about, the Ansonia game. They had a great running back in Kevin Sharkey. They also had Dennis Tinney, who was very good. Rich Lester was a very good quarterback, and their defense was really good too. I mean, talk about that game.
They were a good team. They were a real good team.
Right.
That was, if you asked me to point one game, was my highlight. And I think I've told you this before. That was my highlight of my
Right.
football, my high school career, was that game. That was just a phenomenal game for me, and it was a little sloppy. I mean, we had some turnovers, we had some fumbles.
Right.
They ran an interception back maybe, or a kickoff back.
And it got called back.
And there was
Right.
a clip. It wasn't the best played game, but it was a fun game to be part of.
Right.
They were a tough team. Every time we scored, they had an answer, and every time they scored, we had an answer. So
Right.
I mean, I know they only scored 2 touchdowns, but I think they had maybe 1 or 2 called back.
Right.
Right. So
And the other thing is, I mean, that defense to hold Kevin Sharkey to 30 yards that day. I mean, the kid was one of the best backs in the state.
absolutely,
Mike Harkin was tremendous that day. I mean, John Paquet played great. I mean, you had so many and Joey Martin, Ben Bartone in the secondary.
You got to think about everybody just stepped up.
Right.
That everybody stepped up because that was the only way we were going to win that game.
Right. And, in the beginning of the game, if you remember, second play of the game, I think Palmieri fumbles. They run it in for a touchdown. Then the very next play, Martin throws an INT, and it looks like, oh, man, they're going to just run away with this game. But you guys didn't panic, and you guys fought back, and then Palmieri made a big run, got it to like the 15-yard line.
Right.
And then talk a little bit about Brian Marcuscio that day.
Was that special?
Talk about, I mean, a kid who's a great kid, just a likable kid, to have that game, that was really special.
What a special day for that kid. I mean, that was just great.
Right.
I mean, looking back, not many players will have a game like that. And
Right.
Brian didn't catch a lot of passes for us, really. He was never a big part of the offense, but that day was just a special day for him.
Right.
That was unbelievable.
I mean, he caught 3 big passes. I mean, and Carl Barrett, he's not somebody that's easy to.
I forgot that name, right?
Right. Cover. He's not somebody.
Fast.
Yeah. I mean, he's good at covering his man, and Brian just, caused fits for him the whole day. But that's what I mean about that team. You guys had superstars. You had 3 big superstars in Martin, Palmieri, and Ann Roman. But then you had all the guys that, I could think of Doug Seibart, who was tremendous on the line, Dave Chevarello, Robbie Hyder. And then you talk about the defense, Mike Harkin. This guy weighed like 145 pounds. He played like he weighed 300.
Right. I know.
I mean, you just had so many guys that stepped up on that team. And I think that's why that team was so successful, because if somebody was down, the other one picked the other one up.
It was just I call it a special year. Everything pretty much went right for us. We had an injury, someone replaced them, they stepped up, they played even better. It was just a special year.
Right. Now, beating Ansonia as a varsity player, what was that feeling like for you when that final snap was taken and you guys are celebrating on the field? Could you even really appreciate it then?
It just. And I can't tell you why. When I moved to Derby when I was a kid,
right?
Someone told me, we hate Ansonia. I'm like, what do you mean? And I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
And they're like, we hate Ansonia. I'm like, okay. We hate Ansonia. And I remember Jimmy Mascola, who was in charge of Pop Warner back then. He's like, Joe, this is the team we got to beat.
Right.
And so it was always instilled to me when I was little. So, when we beat them, it was, again, a long time ago.
And they were a defending state champion.
Yes, they were.
So
right.
They hadn't lost. I think they were on like a 28-game winning streak because they had not lost. You guys were the last team to beat them in '88. and they hadn't lost till you beat them in 90. So you're talking, a
Few years.
long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking 21. So it's 21 games. I mean, that's a long time for a team to,
They have a heck of a program.
Right, and their coaching staff is tremendous.
They do. I mean, credit them, and I hate to say this, it's not much of a rival for them anymore because they have won so many games.
Right.
I would imagine that they don't really feel like Derby's a rival right now.
Right. You hope that rivalry could return someday because I mean, that's when that rivalry is hot. It's the best in the state.
Right.
It really is.
Mike, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. I think the sport has changed so much with the kids moving.
Right.
And I mean, Kevin Sharkey's kid plays in Derby baseball.
Right.
So, it's just and my son plays in Oxford, and
right.
Back
it's just not the same.
It's not
right?
the kids move around now. That it's just back then. Derby kid wasn't going to play in Ansonia. There was no way Ansonia kid was going to play in Derby. It just wasn't going to happen.
No, it wasn't.
But now, with the parents moving, divorces, which is the norm, it just there's people moving all over the place. Not like I love these kids from all over now.
Right.
And it's just different. It's just totally different now.
Exactly. Now, like I said, you were making a lot of big catches that year at tight end, and in the state championship game, you really got Derby moving that first half. You caught like 2 big catches. And eventually Palmieri was able to run it in. I think it was the Sheehan game. Ben took over for Joe Martin. Joe Martin was hurt, and he had 4 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers. And if I'm not mistaken, weren't you one of those receivers that day in the Sheehan game? I'm pretty sure. I think
I don't remember. Benny and I had a special bond. We from the freshman year. We I was his guy to go to.
Right.
And we always connected. So
it seemed like he always targeted you a lot when he threw the ball.
He did.
Right.
Again, different players always stepped up in almost every game.
Right. And talk about the Lyman Hall game a little bit because again, I don't compare it to the East Haven one because I think you guys came ready to play. Lyman Hall was trying to end your winning streak. I mean, they came out that night and that was a tough game. It went to overtime. Talk about how intense that game was a little bit.
So that game was my best game of my career.
Right.
In high school, I got the player of the game. And that day, everything slowed up for me. And I'll never forget that game because for some reason, the game was slow. And I think I had like 16 solo tackles that day.
Right.
And, that was the highlight of my football career at the high school. I always remember that game.
I think that was, it's hard to say it's Derby's biggest victory when you've beaten Ansonia and you've beaten Cheshire and you've beaten Seymour, Shelton, North Haven. But that was the game where everybody was like, oh, my God, they could get knocked off here. That was the biggest win of the year in a lot of ways.
That was huge. And, we didn't blow out a lot of teams. There was a lot of close games.
Yeah, every game was close. I mean, it wasn't easy, but that's how special that team was because you guys – people would be biting their nails in the stands, but you guys were not going to lose. You just refused to lose.
We got every break that year. It was one of those years where we got every break.
Right.
The ball just bounced our way no matter what. And I remember them driving at the end of the game like, oh, man, we're going to lose this freaking game.
Yeah.
And then I think a ball bounced off one of the players, and Johnny caught it downfield.
Yep.
Like, oh, yeah, we're back in it.
Right. Because I think you guys were down at the half by at least a touchdown. It might have been 2, but I remember, like, the feeling at half, like, for the fans is, we had lost the game. That's how it felt like,
Listen, I'm sure a few of us felt like that, too. I'm like, this is not good.
Right.
This is not good. And then, again, the ball bounced our way. When that ball bounced and Johnny caught that pass downfield, then, again, we did a 180. Oh, yeah, we're back. We're going in. We're doing this. And then when the game went to overtime, I knew we were winning.
Right.
There was no doubt about it in my mind.
Right. And it's kind of ironic that Scott Ezzo made, 2 big plays in both overtime games, the touchdown, and then he picks off the pass on 4th down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, you couldn't somebody has to write a book someday on this team because they're so special. Now, let's talk about the state championship game. I alluded to it a little earlier. You're up 7-0 at half, but a lot of people feel like, you guys should be up even more. I think at the half, you guys were expecting Coach DeCenzo to chastise you guys for not playing well, but he took a different approach. He came in the half and said, we got this. Don't worry about anything. I mean, talk about just the genius of him because, I mean, if he came down hard on you guys, who knows what could have happened,
Mike, we came out flat.
Right.
We really came out flat. And I remember going before halftime on the bus ride there. I remember, I think it was Jimmy Mascola. He didn't know I was behind him, and he's like, "Joey's gonna have a tough day today," and I'm like, "What the hell is he talking about?" And he's like, "Their defensive end is huge."
Right.
So that infuriated me. So. So when I got out there, the kid was big. He was a big. And at that time, I was not the biggest kid anymore. I mean, I plateaued at 210. This kid was big. So I'm like, oh, great. So, but I mean, it infuriated me that Jimmy said that. So I fought with this kid from the first play.
Right.
They ended up stopping the game, and Coach DeSantis was like, Joey, go shake his hand. So I said, all right. So I walked over there, and he wouldn't shake my hand.
Really?
Yeah, they stopped the game. They made me shake his hand. He wouldn't shake my hand, so I went back to the huddle. Next play, I was trash talking him the whole time.
Right.
So I just went in a dark place with that because I was so mad at what Jimmy Mascola said.
Right.
If the kid made one tackle the whole day, it would have been a lot.
Wow.
So getting to halftime, I was just so infuriated about what Jimmy said and trying to beat this kid. I couldn't tell you what Coach DeSantis said to us.
So you just zoned
I
it out,
had
right?
no idea what Coach said. All I know is this kid was not getting beat the best of me that day.
Right. So the second half comes, and you guys blow them out. Jason has an unbelievable second half. You know what I always liked, too, about that game is a kid like Rich Scaife was able to get in the end zone that day. He was, very, underrated player. He was a role player, but he did a great job. And for him to score, it's stuff like that that makes the team special when you see people like that who don't always steal the headlines, but they have that one shining moment.
A championship game, you're blowing, and someone that doesn't really, have a huge job or, get a lot of playing time, scores a touchdown. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to love that. Absolutely.
Right. So this game was decided by the fourth quarter. Again, you were thinking about that kid, so you probably zoned it out, but was there a part of you with, say, maybe 5 minutes left saying to yourself, wow, I'm a state champion, or you couldn't even really?
Again, when I play, and my wife will tell you this today, I go somewhere else.
Right.
So, and I still do with my son when, I'm coaching his team, and I just zone, and I don't, I could tell you this. I remember the ride home, and I remember us going through the town with the fire trucks and the police leading us through.
Right.
And then I can tell you that's when it hit me.
Right.
There was no better feeling.
That was
than
an awesome feeling.
It
Rob
was.
Hyder waving the flag.
It
and
was,
stuff.
it still gives me goosebumps thinking about that.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Do you still have the state championship jacket? I mean, did you keep that?
My mother packs all that up for my kids. So, yeah, we still have all that stuff.
Right. And you still have the ring, obviously, right?
Oh, yes.
That's got to be a good feeling. I mean, do you look at it every, maybe 6 months or so?
I show it to my kids.
Right.
They make fun of me, but,
Hey, it's a big deal. I mean, it's the last championship Derby had in football. So, I mean.
It's been a long time. We're due.
Right. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were there for the 25th anniversary, correct?
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yep.
That was a great moment. I really liked that Coach DeCenzo was there. He walked out on the field.
Absolutely.
But just talk about walking out there with your children, how good of a feeling that felt for you.
It was just I haven't been on that field like that in a long time, 20-something years. So it was, back then, that was a huge part of my life. So, walking out there with my kids was just amazing.
Did your kids enjoy it?
Oh,
I mean, yeah, they had a blast.
My kids are awesome, and they love it, and they love their dad, and I try to make them part of everything I do.
That's awesome. So let's talk about your senior year, and it wasn't a great year, and it was a sad year in the sense that a 28-year winning streak came to an end. But in week 4 of that season, you lose Benny Bartone. He breaks his wrist on defense, and just a shame that happened. But let me ask you, you guys still won the game that night. I think Marco Brito kicked a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
You're 3-1. Were you still confident that you guys could have a good season at that point?
Mike, I have to go back a little further on that. When the season started,
right,
a week before the first game, I got bad news in my family that my grandfather was dying.
Right.
And I didn't, no, it was a routine doctor visit, something like that, and they told me, he's got a couple months to live.
Oh, man.
So for me, that was when the wheels fell off.
Right.
My grandfather kind of held the glue together for the Ferrigno family, and we were devastated. So that's how my season started. Is it was very hard for me that
Right.
playing without thinking, because he was my grandfather
Right.
was everything to me. So the wheels were falling
And
off.
now
me.
he still went to games that year,
He
didn't
did.
he?
He
Right.
made it, when he was having his good day. We didn't know how long he was going to last for.
Right. I think during basketball it happened.
Yeah,
correct.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that the wheels fell off me before my season even started. So it was a struggle for me to even play at any of those games.
Right.
So when Benny went down, I mean, it was just bad. Bad went
Right.
to worse. And that was supposed to be Ben and mine's year where we went all state. We won
Right.
scholarships to college, and it was a 180 from the year before.
Right.
Nothing went right. The
No, I know.
ball did not bounce our way. There was no breaks. It was just
No, it was-
unbelievable.
Even the Seymour game, you guys ended up losing that game, but the first half, it felt like you guys were going to win it. I do remember you guys had a rough game against Trinity Catholic that year. You won by a touchdown. What do you think, though, about that team? Do you think losing Ben was the deciding factor? Or you just think that you had a lot of kids, though, that besides you, Ben, and John, that really didn't play a lot till their senior year?
This is what I was going to tell you is our junior, we didn't blow out a lot of teams.
Right.
So those kids didn't get a lot of playing time.
Right.
So, we're seniors now, and we have a lot of first-time players, first-year players, kids that didn't get a lot of playing time the year before.
Right.
That Trinity game, I thought we were in big trouble.
Right.
I remember they were driving, and then
Yeah, it was-
the big kid came out the middle. I know I slapped the ball out of his hand, and Gary Lucarelli recovered. We got the ball back, and we ended up winning.
Right.
But I knew we were in trouble.
But it was a nail biter.
It was a nail biter.
It definitely was. But when Ben went down, I think Coach DeCenzo was torn. He didn't know if he should put Dave Van Roman at quarterback or Dominic Buono. Dave ended up getting hurt as well in that game. So you guys go into the Chester game without Ben and Dave. One thing about Dominic Buono that's a little unfair is I think a lot of people sometimes think, well, because Ben wasn't the quarterback, that's why you guys didn't win. I thought Dominic played as well as anybody could, being put in that position.
He never
Right. He wasn't a quarterback by trade.
No.
And the way he went out there in that Chester game, he played
Right.
such a great game. And the Amity game that you guys won, Dom was huge in that game.
Yeah.
He made a big run, got you guys back in the game. I thought he did great replacing Ben.
Absolutely.
Right.
What could we ask for? He's never did it before.
Right.
That's tough. To
Yeah.
put a kid in that position that's never done it before
Yeah.
and expect him to be Ben was awesome.
Right.
In my opinion, Ben is one of the best athletes coming out of Derby High School in
definitely.
every single
Right.
sport. And I'm sure at some point he'll be in the Hall of Fame. He was that good, in my opinion.
Right.
So for Dominic to replace Ben, it wasn't fair to compare the two.
Right. But I thought he did as great
Absolutely.
as he could possibly do.
No doubt about it.
Now, let me ask you, you guys lose to Cheshire. They go for a 2-point conversion. You lose 8-7. You win that game. Obviously, you're going to have a winning season, but do you think that game changed everything? Because I really felt, even though you guys lost that night, that you guys were going to beat Ansonia, because I just felt like you guys, were playing with a chip on your shoulder because Ben went down. But, what do you think happened towards the end? Do you just really think sometimes the other, you got to tip your cap to the other teams and they were just a little better?
We lost that game. That was a tough game. It
Yeah.
was in the pouring rain.
Oh,
I don't know if
yeah.
you remember that. That was a monsoon.
Yeah, it was.
And I remember that, and that was tough. That was real tough.
And you had to have a sophomore running back. I think Jeff Robinson had to fill in for Dave.
And we had sophomores playing, starting on defense too.
Yes, Mike Paquet.
Yeah, Mike.
Right.
Mike. I think outside or defense. I don't remember what he played, but he was starting.
Safety, I think.
Was
yeah.
it okay? So,
right.
but that's not good when you have sophomores starting for.
Right. Especially when you're because you lost Ben on defense too. Never mind.
Ben was as good as he was on offense. He was good on defense.
Right. I think he had like 10 INTs his junior year. So he was very productive. Now you go in. You had you guys lose to Ansonia, but I remember you scored a touchdown, and I'll never forget you kneeled down and you I think that was a tribute to your grandfather,
yeah,
correct?
it was,
I
yes.
thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
If there was one positive to take out of that, I always remember seeing that, and that was just, a great sight to see. You did have a good senior year despite the losing. I think you were all Hoosie. I think you made all area, if I'm not mistaken. it's tough when you lose, but I mean, did you feel satisfied with how you did as an individual that year?
No, God, no.
No.
No, I mean,
No.
that was, I first of all, when the wheels fell off,
Right.
We let Mr. DeCenzo down. We didn't, it was very hard for me to do much more than what I did. Because,
Right.
Again, not take anything away from Dominic, but he wasn't Ben.
Right.
And I know him throw passes to me, so it was
Right.
So I was more of a blocking tight end than anything else.
Right.
It was just a tough year all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, the thing of it is that it was, I looked to that Sheehan game. It was 7-7 for so long, and then I think they made a big run towards the end. Ben was having trouble with the snap that night. I mean, he had just came back.
He just came back, right?
Yeah,
and listen, I know he played the last 3 or 4 games or 2 or 3 games,
but he was still hurt.
Yeah, he was still hurt.
He wasn't. I don't even think he really recovered till after basketball, because even the basketball season, you could definitely see that wrist was still healing.
No doubt about it.
Right.
I mean, come on, he broke his wrist. And,
Right.
A couple weeks later, we were playing football.
Right. And I think he came back more to try to help you guys.
There's no. I mean, you think about it. The kid is a senior year.
Yeah.
He's a star football player, and this is it. Of his career. So you either come back or that was it. You're never going to play again.
Right.
So I'm sure he rushed it back for many different reasons.
Right. Joe, you seem like you've been a big success since high school. I mean, you've done a lot of great things. Talk about that losing season and what type of adversity you felt you had to go through. It was a learning lesson, I think, for you, that sometimes you're going to fall, but if you get back up, that's all that matters.
It's not, everybody, a lot of people fall. It's how you get back up. Exactly. And
right.
And, the way I was brought up and with the winning, from the culture of Derby back then, I think that set me, it's how you make what you make of it. And,
right.
And I took it in one way, and I, my work ethic and what I do, and it's just either I'm going to be the best or I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So, and I get that from my years here in Derby.
Right. You talked about how you did a lot of the running on your own and conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
You were always known for wearing your football stuff and running those stairs every night. And I think you would jog like by Coon Hollow Road and stuff. Just tell me and tell the people, like, what was your drive to always like do football 24/7?
It's just one of those things. It's in my DNA. I love it.
Right.
I could talk football day and night forever. I could play. I love football. I when I was in 7th and 8th grade, it would be 9, 10 o'clock. It would be snowing out, and I go put my work boots on, and I'd start running Academy Hill through Grandview Boulevard. I'd be doing a circle, and my parents were like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right.
I'm like, I got to work out. I got to do something. I can't sit still in this. So I just love to work out, and I only worked out to get better in football.
Right. Exactly. Now, 20 years later, you've gotten back into football with your son.
Yep.
You're coaching up at Oxford.
Yep.
And as of right now, I think they're 6-1. They're in the playoffs.
They are.
Which is awesome. But just talk about what that's been like for you to be able to not only get back in the game, but to be able to coach your kid.
Oh, man. I'm having one of the best years I've had in a long time for
Right.
many different reasons. I've been away from the game after high school, so I graduated in 92.
Right.
I played half a year at Southern. I played 3 years of semi-pro football. But we're still talking. I've been away from the game for 20 years.
Right.
So when Joey told me, he said, "Dad, I'm ready to play," because he didn't want to play for a while, and I didn't want to push him.
And what grade is he in right now?
Joey's in 6th grade.
6th grade, right.
So, and I didn't want to. I wanted to push him, but I didn't want to push him. If God forbid I push him and he gets hurt, and
right.
So when he's ready to play, he'll tell me. So it was in July. He's like, or June. He's like, "Dad, I think we're gonna play football this year instead of fall baseball." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Well, listen, we can't just go out the day before." And we got to work out all summer.
Right.
And my son doesn't like, he's a big kid. Big kids don't like to run.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, Joe, so this is what we got to do. We got to work out every day for half an hour. We'll make it fun. You got to prepare. If you can't get through my workout, then you can't play because you're not going to be able to go on a football field and play.
Right.
So we worked out every single day. I had him on Fort Lauderdale Beach, 6 o'clock every morning. We were jogging, doing sprints.
Right.
Working on stances. I had him coming out, just different positions, catching passes. People
Right.
were looking at me, what the hell is this guy doing to his son at 6 o'clock in the morning? So we did that all summer. And when it came to practice, like, he just grasped it, and it was just such a good moment for me.
Right.
Like, everything I taught him during the summer, he was doing now at practice, and it's just a great feeling to see him grow. And
Right.
he's starting both ways.
Oh,
And,
good.
yeah,
So first year. He's
first
doing
year
it.
starting both ways, line
Right.
on both sides. He's making lots of tackles on defense, blocking his guy on offense, and it's an amazing.
And now,
feeling.
are you an assistant or the head coach?
So I'm an assistant. Ed Henry
Right.
from Ansoni is the head coach.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, it's again, like I said, things have changed so much. You would never think 20, 25 years ago
Right.
we'd be out of Derby. He's out of Ansonia, and we're both in
Right.
Oxford. So it's just a great feeling. The kids we have a lot of first year players,
Right.
and it's great to coach them, and we're winning. So
Right.
we got to win.
I mean, hey, you play for a reason.
Right.
You got to instill that. So let me ask you this: what advice would you want to give to somebody who's playing high school football? I mean, what's the best advice you would give to them? Obviously they got to work hard and stuff, but what would your message be to them?
There's a couple different things you look at it. You just, if you're part of like the Derby program, is just it's if you really buy into it, you're
Right.
going to be successful in football and in life and thereafter. If you buy into it and you follow what everybody teaches you, there's just really my success comes from when I grown up. What's instilled in me,
Right.
and it could. You don't have to take it that way. There's the kids are like, oh, Joe, that's not how it works. But for me, I
Old
did it.
school,
I
right.
did it. I'm doing it now. From my work success to my son playing, it's good, man. Things are good.
Right. Now let me ask you: would Joe Ferrigno someday ever want to go to the next level and coach high school, or are you pretty much set with just Pop Warner or AYF, whatever?
I'm a Joe Ferrigno Jr. fan. So wherever my son goes, I go.
Right.
I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. So
Right.
my free time I spend with my family and my kids,
Right.
and I coach them up. Otherwise, I'm working. So as much as I would love to do that right now, that's not in the cards.
Right. Well, Joe, I think you had an awesome career, a state champion. Like I said, you were a two-sport player, a captain on the basketball team. And I know you were I think the solo captain on that team. And, did a great job. And you're a great Derby guy. It's really been an honor talking to you today. I was always a big fan. And you guys are a big part of that state championship team. You have to have role players, and you definitely were. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
Mike, I appreciate it. I love what you're doing for everybody, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that was Joe Ferrigno, number 88 for the Derby Red Raiders. And I'm Mike Cannici for Valley Sports Rewind saying goodbye, everyone.